My 79-year-old father only needed a ride to the hospital, but my car was in the shop. When I asked my husband for his car, he said, "Not my problem. Figure it out." I simply said, "Okay." The next day, he called me 38 times. The first time I ever called my father crying, I was 7 years old and had fallen off my bike on the sidewalk in front of our house. He was at my side before I finished the sentence, knees on the concrete, hands already checking mine for damage, voice already low and steady and calm. That was Antonio Oliveira. That was always Antonio Oliveira. He was not a man who talked about love. He was a man who demonstrated it, daily, quietly, without ever once asking to be noticed for it. He showed up to every school presentation I ever gave, sitting in those small plastic chairs that were absolutely not designed for a man his size, clapping the loudest every single time. He drove me to every job interview in my 20s, parked around the corner so I wouldn't be embarrassed, and was still there waiting when I came back out. He fixed things around my apartment without being asked, showed up with tools and a thermos of coffee and left before I could properly thank him. Love, for my father, was a verb. Always had been. He raised me alone from the time I was 14. My mother passed on a Tuesday in March, the kind of March that never quite became spring, and Antonio Oliveira did not collapse. He grieved the way he did everything else, with his shoulders back and his hands busy. He learned to braid my hair badly but consistently. He learned to cook 3 things well and rotated them for years. He showed up to every parent-teacher conference alone, in his good shirt, with a notepad, taking the whole thing seriously in a way that still makes my throat tighten when I think about it. He never once made me feel like I was a burden he was carrying. He made me feel like I was the reason he got up. So when Antonio Oliveira called me at 7:38 on a Wednesday morning and told me his chest felt heavy, I didn't think. I didn't calculate, I didn't weigh options or check schedules or consider the inconvenience. I moved. What I was not prepared for was the person standing between me and the door. My name is Fernanda Oliveira. I am 53 years old. I teach adult literacy classes on Wednesday evenings. I make the best rice and beans of anyone in my family, and I have spent 11 years of marriage believing that keeping the peace was the same thing as having peace. It took one Wednesday morning to understand exactly how wrong I was. It was January 14th. I remember the time precisely because I was standing at the kitchen counter watching the coffee finish brewing, thinking about absolutely nothing, which is the most honest mental state I am capable of before 8 a.m. When my phone lit up on the counter. Dad. I picked up on the first ring. Fernanda. His voice was thin. Antonio Oliveira did not do thin. This was a man who had worked construction for 30 years, who had fixed a leaking pipe in my building's basement at age 76 without breaking a sweat, who had never once in my life called me to complain about anything. Dad, are you okay? I don't want to bother you, Minhafila. There it is. 79 years old and still apologizing for existing. Dad. It's just a heaviness. Here. A pause. And my left arm keeps going numb on and off since last night. I was already moving toward the hallway. Dad? Stop talking. I'm coming. You don't have to. I'm coming. Unlock the front door and sit down. Do not do anything else. Just sit. A small breath. Okay. I hung up and stood still for exactly 3 seconds. My car, a 2018 Honda Fit, was at Gonçalves Auto on Rua das Palmeiras. Transmission issue. They'd called Tuesday. Wouldn't be ready until Friday at the earliest. Marcos's car. A black Toyota Hilux sitting wide and unbothered in the garage. Full tank. He'd filled it up himself on Sunday. Marcos was upstairs. I could hear the shower running. That long, unhurried shower he took every single morning, the kind that suggested the hot water bill was someone else's concern. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Marcos. The shower kept running. Marcos. The water stopped. A pause that was not a pause. It was a decision being assembled. What? Not what's wrong. Not 1 second. Just what? Flat and slightly inconvenienced. I need to borrow the Hilux. My dad is having chest pains. His left arm is going numb. I need to take him to Santa Cruz. Silence. The specific kind that isn't thinking. The kind that has already landed somewhere and is just finding the words for it. He appeared at the top of the stairs 40 seconds later. Towel around his waist, hair wet, expression completely unreadable in a way I had learned, over 11 years, to read perfectly. Fernanda, I can't today. Marcos, his left arm, I heard you. He leaned against the doorframe, crossed his arms. Call an ambulance. He doesn't like ambulances. He had a terrible experience years ago when Mom, then call someone else. He was already turning back toward the bedroom. I have the Renato meeting at 9 and then lunch with the regional team. I'm not going to spend my whole day in a hospital waiting room. I stood completely still. Marcos. My voice came out quieter than I expected. He stopped, half-turned, looked at me with an expression I will spend the rest of my life trying to forget. Not concern, not guilt, inconvenience. He's your father, Fernanda. A pause. Not mine. A beat. Figure it out. He went back into the bedroom. The door closed gently. Not a slam. That almost made it worse. A slam would have been emotion. He just closed it the way you close a cabinet. Like a 79-year-old man's left arm going numb was a minor logistical issue he didn't have bandwidth for. I stood at the bottom of those stairs for a moment. Just a moment. Then I pulled out my phone. Seu Claudio Ferreira lived 6 houses down, on the corner. 68 years old, retired civil servant, widower for 4 years, drove a well-maintained Fiat Uno that was older than some of my students, but never missed a morning, just like its owner. He was the kind of man who still greeted neighbors by name, who kept the sidewalk in front of his house swept even in January, who had known my father for going on 15 years. He'd been at my mother's funeral. 3rd row, hat in hand, eyes down. He picked up on the second ring. Fernanda, tudo bem? Seu Claudio, I need a favor. My dad is having chest pains. My car is in the shop and I need someone to drive us to Santa Cruz. I'm sorry to ask. 15 minutes. No negotiation, no conditions, no meeting at 9 to check. I'll be at your father's door. You go to him now. That was it. That was the whole conversation. I called my father back immediately. Dad, I'm on my way. So Claudio is driving. You don't need to do anything. Just stay sitting. Do you hear me? You really don't need to. Dad. A small pause. Okay, minha filha. So Claudio pulled up to my father's house in 13 minutes. I was already there, sitting next to Dad on the couch, his hand in mine, both of us pretending we weren't scared. Dad had put on his good jacket. Beige, the one he wore to important things. The sight of it nearly undid me. You didn't have to get dressed up, Dad. I'm going out, he said simply, as if that settled it entirely. We helped him to the car slowly, carefully. He thanked So Claudio 3 times before we reached the end of the street. So Claudio told him to stop thanking him and focus on breathing correctly. Dad told him he'd been breathing correctly for 79 years and didn't need coaching. So Claudio said clearly not, or we wouldn't be in this car. Dad laughed. Actually laughed. A short surprise sound. I looked out the window at the morning and felt 2 things simultaneously. Gratitude for So Claudio, deep and immediate, and something else. Something cold and very, very still. Something I didn't examine yet. I just let it sit there, the way you leave something on the counter when you don't have time to deal with it properly. I'd deal with it later. Santa Cruz Hospital was already busy when we arrived. We checked in at the ER at 8:31 a.m. A nurse named Dona Aparecida, small woman, quick hands, the kind of focus that comes from years of not having time not to be, got Dad into a room within 20 minutes. The doctor on call was Dr. Rafael Mendez. Young, deliberate, calm in the way that good doctors are calm, not detached, just anchored. Mr. Oliveira, I want to run an EKG and check your enzyme levels. The combination of symptoms you're describing, the chest heaviness, the arm, we take those seriously regardless of age, especially at your age. Dad looked at me. His eyes were asking a question he wouldn't say out loud. Do whatever he says, Dad. He nodded once, Then he reached out and put his hand on my arm. "You came," he said quietly. Like he hadn't been completely certain I would. Like the fact of my presence was something that required acknowledgement. That hit me somewhere I wasn't ready for. "Dad, I'll always come." He patted my arm twice, lay back against the pillow, closed his eyes. I walked out to the waiting room, sat down in a plastic chair under fluorescent lighting, and stared at a television mounted in the corner playing a morning program on low volume. My phone had one notification, not from Marcos, from the dry cleaner, confirming a pickup. I turned the phone face down on my knee, got up, found the coffee machine near the elevator, and drank the worst coffee of my life without tasting a single sip. Marcos didn't text once, not even, "Is he okay?" I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and 51 minutes. Plastic chair, bad lighting, a television in the corner cycling through a morning program nobody was watching. I drank 2 cups of machine coffee I don't remember tasting, and ate half a granola bar I found at the bottom of my bag from some previous version of my life that had remembered to pack snacks. So Claudio had offered to stay. I told him to go home. He told me he'd stay in the parking lot. I told him that was unnecessary. He told me he'd already turned the engine off. That was the end of the conversation. So Claudio Ferreira, 68 years old, a man with nowhere he had to be and no one asking anything of him, sat in a hospital parking lot on a Wednesday morning because a neighbor's daughter needed someone nearby. Because that's what people do. Some people. I sat with my hands in my lap, and I thought about my father's face when I walked into his living room that morning. He'd been sitting on the edge of the couch, his good beige jacket already on, both hands flat on his knees, like he was bracing for something. His face when he saw me, that specific kind of relief that tries to hide itself, so you won't feel the weight of how much it was needed. He'd smiled immediately, waved a hand like it was nothing, like he hadn't spent God knows how long sitting there alone in the quiet left arm going numb, not wanting to bother anyone. 79 years old and still trying not to be a burden to the people he spent his entire life carrying. My phone buzzed at 10:12 a.m. I grabbed it. A promotional message from a supermarket. I set it back down. Marcos had not called, had not texted, had gone to his 9 o'clock meeting and then presumably his lunch with the regional team, and was living his Wednesday with the full, unbothered momentum of a man who had said figure it out and genuinely moved on. I thought about that. I let myself think about it fully in that waiting room, with the fluorescent light humming and the TV playing on low. I stopped managing it, stopped filing it away neatly the way I had trained myself to file things away, and I just let it sit in front of me like something I had to look at. He's your father, not mine. 11 years. 11 years of Antonio Oliveira asking after Marcos politely. Of Dad fixing the bookshelf in our guest room and rebuilding the back step and showing up with tools every time something broke, because that was how he showed love. With his hands, with his presence, with his time. 11 years of my father treating my husband with more consistent warmth and dignity than Marcos had returned in a single morning. And Marcos had a meeting. I didn't let myself go further than that. Not yet. I just noted it, filed it somewhere different from where I usually filed things, somewhere I could find it later. At 11:17 a.m., Dr. Mendez came out to the waiting room. His face was composed, not alarmed, but serious in the way that doctors are serious when the news is not catastrophic, but is absolutely not nothing. "Ms. Oliveira." I stood up before he finished saying my name. "Your father had what we call a mild cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but his body was sending very clear warning signals that we can't ignore. We want to keep him overnight for observation, run additional tests, and adjust his medications. The good news is he's stable. He's alert." A pause. He also wanted me to tell you that the crossword in the magazine we gave him is, and I'm quoting directly, "embarrassingly easy." I laughed. Out loud. In a hospital waiting room, startling the woman 2 seats over. "That's him," I said. "Can I see him? Give us 20 minutes to get him settled." I sat back down, put my elbows on my knees, stared at the floor. Stable. He was stable. His body had been warning him, and we'd gotten there, and he was stable and complaining about crosswords, which meant he was fine, which meant everything was fine. which meant I could now feel all of the things I had been carefully not feeling since 7:38 that morning. I didn't cry. I wanted to. I sat there and breathed through it and didn't. I called Seo Claudio instead. He's stable, I told him. Mild cardiac event. They're keeping him overnight. Thank God. He said it simply, the way people say things they actually mean. Thank God. You doing okay? Yes, I said. And then, Seo Claudio. Thank you. I mean it. Fernanda. His voice was gentle but firm, the way older men's voices get when they want you to stop thanking them and just receive something. Don't thank me. Go see your father. Dad was sitting up when I got to his room, color already returning to his face, the monitors beeping quietly beside him, an IV in his left arm, and a magazine open in his lap with a crossword puzzle he had by the looks of it, already half destroyed. He looked up when I walked in. 7 letters, he said immediately. Starts with D, means complete loyalty. I stopped in the doorway and looked at him. This man, this 79-year-old man who had braided my hair badly and consistently and driven me to job interviews and parked around the corner and shown up with coffee and tools and never once asked me to acknowledge any of it. Devotion, I said. He counted the boxes, wrote it in slowly, nodded. Sit down, minha filha. You look like you've been standing in a waiting room for 3 hours, 2 hours and 51 minutes. Sit. I sat. He put the magazine down. We looked at each other for a moment, the way people look at each other after something frightening has passed and you're both still there and still whole, and the relief of that is almost too large for the room. You didn't have to come, he said, which was his way of saying thank you. Yes, I did, I said, which was my way of saying obviously. He smiled. A slow, warm smile that took over his whole face the way it always had, since I was 7 years old, since before that. We sat like that for a while, easy and quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists between people who have spent enough time together that silence doesn't need to be filled. He did 2 more crossword clues. I drank terrible hospital coffee and didn't complain about it once. Then he closed the magazine, set it on the bedside table, folded his hands in his lap. Marcos didn't come. He said it the same way he would say it rained this morning. Observational, calm, no accusation in it, no performance. Just a man who had been watching the door for 2 hours and had registered quietly, who walked through it and who didn't. I didn't answer right away. He had a meeting, I said carefully. Dad looked at me for a long moment. His eyes, dark brown and still sharp, the same eyes I'd grown up trying not to lie to because they were simply too good at listening. A meeting. And a lunch. He nodded slowly. Once. The way he nodded when he was absorbing something he'd already suspected. I see. He didn't say anything else about it. Didn't push. Didn't editorialize. Just picked up his magazine again. Turned to a new page and read in silence for a moment. Then, without looking up, "You know what I remember about the day you were born?" I looked at him. I remember sitting in that waiting room. Worse than this one, believe me, plastic chairs from 1987. And I remember thinking that whatever came through that door, whatever happened next, I was going to show up for it, completely, without conditions. He turned a page. That was the decision I made before I even met you. That you would never wonder if I was coming. The room was very quiet. Dad, I'm not saying it to you, he said gently. I'm saying it because I want you to hear what it sounds like, what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that kind of decision. He looked up then, directly at me. Every person deserves to have someone who made that decision about them. I looked at my father. 79 years old, IV in his arm, hospital bed, good jacket folded neatly over the chair beside him, the jacket he had put on because he was going out, and going out meant presenting yourself properly, because dignity mattered, because some things mattered. My throat tightened. Yeah, I said quietly. I know, Dad. He held my gaze for one more moment. Then he nodded, slow and sure, and went back to his crossword. Now go find me something edible from that cafeteria. Whatever they brought for lunch tasted like something nobody finished and then somebody reheated. I laughed, stood up, and as I walked down that hospital corridor toward the cafeteria, past the nurse's station and the elevator and the bad coffee machine, I thought about what my father had just said. Not at me. For me. The way he had always done things. Not to be noticed, not to make a point, but because he believed I was worth the truth. Every person deserves someone who made that decision about them. I thought about the bottom of the stairs that morning. I thought about the door closing gently. I thought about figure it out. And something in me, something that had been patient and quiet and very, very still for a long time, made a decision of its own. I stayed with Dad until 4 p.m. We watched half a game show with the volume on. He beat me at a word game he invented using hospital equipment and Brazilian state capitals. He was sharper than me on his worst day. Always had been. At 3:44, just before I left, he took my hand. Fernanda. His voice had shifted. The easy afternoon quiet was gone. This was his other voice. The one he used when he meant something with all of him. Yeah, Dad. Marcos went to lunch. Not a question. I didn't answer right away. Outside the window, the afternoon light was hitting the buildings at a low angle, gold and tired and honest. With the regional team, I said quietly. The words landed in that room like something dropped from a height. Dad didn't react, didn't raise his voice. He just nodded once, slowly, and looked toward the window. Something moved across his face. Not anger, not exactly hurt. Something more like a conclusion. The expression of a man who has been paying attention for a long time and has just finished adding everything up. I kissed his forehead at 3:58 p.m. I'll be back tomorrow morning. You don't have to, Dad. He stopped, nodded. Okay, minha filha. So Claudio was waiting at the curb. We drove home in comfortable silence, old radio station playing low. Somewhere on the way, watching the city move past the window, I realized I wasn't angry at Marcos. I was done. Thursday, January 15th. 6:52 in the morning. I woke before the alarm. That's how you know something has settled onto your chest that sleep couldn't move. I lay on my side of the bed, the right side, always the right, 11 years, and I still slept like I was leaving room for someone who wanted to be there, and stared at the ceiling. Marcos was still asleep, breathing slow and even, completely unbothered. I got up, went downstairs, made coffee. Yes, with the loud machine. No, I did not feel remotely bad about it. He chose lunch over my father's left arm going numb. He could survive the coffee machine. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the morning come through the window. I thought about Dad, about the way he'd looked in that hospital bed, his good jacket folded over the chair because he'd dressed up for the occasion of being sick. About the way he'd said you came like he hadn't been completely certain I would. 2 words. 79 years of love compressed into 2 words. I was on my second cup when I heard Marcos on the stairs. He came in, poured himself coffee, leaned against the counter. A beat of silence. The specific kind married people recognize, the kind waiting for someone to bring something up. He brought it up. How's Antonio? Antonio. Not your dad. Not Dad. Antonio, like he was a colleague. Like he was someone Marcos had met once at a function and vaguely remembered. Stable, I said. Mild cardiac event. They're keeping him 1 more day. He nodded. Good. A silence. How was lunch? I asked. He blinked. Just once. But I caught it. It was fine, he said carefully. Fernanda, I want you to understand that yesterday was genuinely complicated. The Renato meeting had been scheduled for 3 weeks. The regional team flew in, Marcos. I said it the same way my father had said my name the night before. Just the word. Flat and complete and final. He stopped. I'm not doing this right now, I said. I stood, rinsed my mug, picked up my phone, my jacket, my keys. I heard you the first time. Yesterday. At the bottom of the stairs. Where are you going? To see my father. I didn't look back. So Claudio drove me again. One hand on the wheel, radio low. No questions. Just present. Completely and simply present. We parked at Santa Cruz at 8:35 a.m. "I'll be here," he said. "So, Claudio?" He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "I'll be here. Some people show up. Notice who they are. Write it somewhere you won't lose it." Dad was sitting up when I arrived. Better color, stronger voice. Reading glasses on, crossword book open, pen already moving. He looked up the moment I walked in. 6 letters. Means to finally see something clearly. I sat down beside him. Awaken. He counted, wrote it in, nodded with satisfaction. "You've always been quick. I learned from you." He smiled, set the book down, folded his hands. "I called Eduardo this morning," he said. I went still. Dr. Eduardo Braga, attorney, 28 years in practice. He had handled my mother's estate, drawn up Dad's will 6 years ago. Precise, careful, the kind of lawyer who listened more than he talked. Dad. Fernanda Helena Oliveira. Full name. All 3. The last time I'd heard all 3, I was 19 years old and had come home at 2 in the morning. I closed my mouth. He looked at me steadily. The morning light through the window fell soft across the bedside table. The crossword book. His folded hands. "I have worked my entire life," he said quietly. "Your mother and I, we went without things, so that what we built would mean something. So it would go to someone who understood what it cost." He picked up his pen. Not to write, just to hold something, to someone who shows up. I didn't speak. Marcos didn't show up. Not yesterday. Not when you had that surgery 2 years ago and needed rides to your follow-up appointments. Not last Christmas when you left dinner early to check on me and came back alone. He looked at me directly. Not when it mattered. Every example landed like a stone in still water. Sinking slow, sinking deep. Because he was right. Every word. And I had been making excuses for years. "Dad, I'm not angry," he said. And the remarkable thing was, he wasn't. Voice perfectly steady. The voice of a man who has thought something through completely and arrived somewhere solid. I'm just accurate. He reached for his phone, found a small folded paper from inside his glasses case. Eduardo Braga's direct number, written in his own handwriting, neat and deliberate. He had come prepared. My father didn't make impulsive decisions. This had been building longer than one hospital stay. "Do you want me to step out?" I asked. He considered it for a moment. "No," he said. "Stay." One word, and everything in me went still and grateful. He dialed at 9:18 a.m. Eduardo. "It's Antonio Oliveira. I hope I'm not catching you early." "Mr. Oliveira." The voice warmed immediately. "Never too early. How are you?" "In the hospital, Santa Cruz." A pause. Serious enough to make me think clearly. Professional silence on the other end. Absorbing, not stalling. "I need to update my documents," Dad said. "The will specifically. I have some very particular changes in mind. Do you want me to come to you?" "Please. Today if possible. I can be there by 2 o'clock. "Perfect." Dad glanced at me. "My daughter will be here." "Very good, Mr. Oliveira. I'll see you at 2. He hung up, set the phone down, picked up his crossword like he hadn't just changed everything, like he hadn't just loved me in the most permanent, powerful way a father could. I sat there a moment, throat tight, eyes steady, barely. "Dad." My voice came out quieter than I intended. "You don't have to do this for me." He didn't look up from the crossword. "I'm not doing it for you, Fernanda." He filled in a letter, calm, deliberate. "I'm doing it because I've earned the right to decide where my life's work goes." He looked up over his glasses, and I've decided. I had approximately 40 questions. I asked 0. "Yes, sir?" "Good." He went back to the puzzle. "Now go find me something from that cafeteria that actually resembles food. What they brought this morning tasted like a decision someone made in a hurry and then denied making." I stood up, and for just 1 second I looked at him. This 79-year-old man in a hospital bed, reading glasses on, pen in hand, completely at peace with himself, and with the world he had spent his whole life building carefully and giving generously. I have spent 53 years trying to be worthy of him. I hope I'm getting there. Dr. Eduardo Braga arrived at 1:56 p.m. Dark suit, leather briefcase, silver hair combed back. He shook my hand firmly at the door, nodded the way precise men nod, acknowledging weight without performing it, and sat down across from my father with a yellow legal pad and a pen that had clearly seen serious work. I sat in the corner, quiet, still, a witness. The conversation between them lasted 43 minutes. I won't put every word here. Some things deserve their privacy. But I will tell you this. By the time Eduardo Braga clicked his pen closed and tucked his legal pad back into that briefcase, the document that Marcos had been silently counting on, that quiet background assumption that had probably informed more decisions than either of us had ever said out loud, had been fundamentally, irrevocably, and legally rewritten. The apartment on Rua das Flores that Dad owned outright paid off in 2011. Fernanda. The savings accounts my parents had spent 30 years building, going without vacations, going without new cars, going without the small luxuries that other couples took for granted. Fernanda, the jewelry, the furniture, the 1972 Volkswagen Fusca that still ran and lived under a cover in Dad's garage, the car my father had spent 3 years restoring with his own hands, the car that smelled like motor oil and patience when you opened the garage on warm days. Fernanda. And 15,000 reais earmarked specifically for the animal shelter on Avenida Central, because Antonio Oliveira had volunteered there every second Sunday for 9 years, because that was the kind of man he was. Marcos's name appeared exactly 0 times. Not my problem, someone had said. Turns out, correct. When Braga stood to leave, he paused at the door and looked back at my father, already returning to his crossword, already completely himself, already utterly unbothered. Your father, he said to me quietly, is one of the clearest thinking people I've worked with in 28 years. I looked at Dad, too. Yeah, I said. I know. I've always known. I left Santa Cruz at 4:25 p.m., so Claudio was at the curb. I got in, closed the door. He looked at me the way old friends look, not searching for information, just checking that you're still standing. Everything okay? Yes, I said quietly. Everything is exactly where it should be. He nodded. Put it in drive. We headed back through the city, and I watched the late afternoon light flatten across the buildings, and I thought about my father's face when Braga left. Completely calm. No triumph in it. No bitterness. Just a man who had made a decision that aligned with everything he had ever believed, and who felt, visibly, the particular peace that comes from that alignment. My phone was in my bag, silent. Marcos hadn't called once all day. He had no idea. Absolutely no idea. But he would. Friday, January 16th, 8:09 in the morning. I was at the pharmacy on Rua Consolação picking up Dad's new medications when it started. Doctor, Mendez had adjusted 3 prescriptions at discharge. I had the list, the dosages, the instructions written in my own handwriting on a folded piece of paper in my jacket pocket because I wasn't taking any chances with this. My phone buzzed in my bag. Marcos. I let it ring. Not out of strategy, not performance. I simply had nothing to say that would land the way it needed to. Not yet. Not standing in a pharmacy line holding a paper bag of heart medication. I slid the phone back into my bag, finished at the counter, thanked the pharmacist, and walked out into the morning. Cold, clear, completely honest air. My phone buzzed again. Marcos. Then again. Then a 4th time. Something was happening. I drove to Santa Cruz. I had a father to bring home. He was ready when I arrived. 9:02 a.m., good jacket on. Small bag packed with the neatness of a man who had always believed that how you left a place said something about you. Dona Aparecida walking beside him, another nurse with the mandatory wheelchair that hospital policy required, and that my father had already, visibly, made his peace with under protest. He stood the moment the automatic doors opened. I can walk to my daughter's car, he announced to the morning air. I had a cardiac event, not a personality removal. Dona Aparecida laughed. The real kind. She took both his hands in hers and held them for a moment. You take care of yourself, Mr. Oliveira. I always do, querida. He squeezed her hands. You're a good one. Don't let this place take that from you. She pressed her lips together, nodded, stepped back. Even leaving a hospital, my father made people feel seen. I held the passenger door open. He climbed in slowly but independently, which mattered to him more than anything. His independence was the last thing he'd surrender, and we both knew it. I closed the door, walked around, got in. He looked at my phone lighting up in the cup holder. Marcos. 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 14 missed calls before 9:30 in the morning. Dad said nothing. He put on his seatbelt, looked out the window at the morning, and smiled faintly. The smile of a man who had made his decision and was at complete peace with it. I drove. Rua das Flores looked exactly as it always had. The cream-colored building with the dark green trim, the small garden out front that Dad kept himself even now, the doormat that said Bem-vindo in faded letters that had been there so long neither of us saw it anymore. But I saw it today. I got him inside, settled him in his chair, made his tea, the specific kind, the specific steep time, because he had told me once and I had never forgotten. Checked the thermostat, went through each medication from Dr. Mendez one by one, reading the labels out loud while Dad sat with his hands around his mug and listened. Fernanda. I was on the third medication. This one's for the blood pressure, twice daily. Fernanda, softer. Sit down. I sat. He reached across the small table and covered my hand with both of his. His hands, the hands that had braided my hair and carried me when I was small and fixed everything that broke and waved from parking lots around corners and held mine in the back of Sir Claudio's car 2 days ago on the way to this same hospital. 53 years of these hands showing up for me. I need you to hear me, he said. I'm listening, Dad. What I did, the will, I didn't do it to punish Marcos. His eyes were steady, clear. No anger in them, no bitterness. Just truth, the way he always delivered it. I did it because it was right. Because your mother and I built something together and it belongs with someone who understands what building something together actually means. He squeezed my hand once. You understand that? I did. In my bones. And Fernanda. His voice dropped slightly. Not softer, more deliberate. I need you to think about your life. Not the money. Not any of this. He gestured vaguely at everything and nothing. About whether you are happy. About whether you are loved the way you deserve to be loved. He looked at me for a long moment. Because you have been showing up alone for a very long time, Mina Filha. And a woman who shows up, a woman like you, deserves someone standing next to her when she does. The kitchen was completely still. Outside on Rua das Flores, a car passed slowly. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere nearby, a bird called twice and went quiet. Everything he said was true. Every single word. My throat tightened. My eyes burned just slightly. I didn't look away from him. Yeah, I said, and my voice came out quiet and rough and completely honest. I know, Dad. He nodded once, slowly, like that was exactly what he needed to hear. Then he patted my hand twice and released it. Good. He picked up his tea. Now, are you going to answer that phone or not? My phone was buzzing on the table between us. Marcos, call number 22. I looked at it, looked at Dad. He raised one eyebrow. I picked up the phone, turned it face down, let it buzz against the wood until it stopped. Not yet, I said. The corner of his mouth moved. Just barely. Not yet, he repeated quietly, like he was tasting the patience in it and finding it exactly right. I left Dad's at 1:20 p.m., drove home to our building on Rua Independencia, parked in the garage next to Marcos's Hilux, and sat in my car for a full minute. 34 missed calls. I went inside. Marcos was in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch in his work clothes, phone in both hands like it was the only solid thing left. He looked up the second I walked through the door. His eyes were different. The careful composure he wore daily, the The composure I had watched him deploy in meetings and dinners and arguments and every moment that required him to appear unaffected. It had cracked. Underneath it was something I hadn't seen before. Something that looked like a man who had spent an entire day realizing exactly what he had done. Good. Said something quiet in the back of my mind. Stay there a while. Fernanda. He stood immediately. I've been calling you all day. I know, I said. I set my keys on the hook by the door. I thought about Thursday night. Dad lying in that hospital bed with monitors on his chest. The EKG. Dr. Mendez's measured face. His body had been warning him. And Marcos had been at lunch. Breadbasket passing. Water glasses getting refilled. Completely unbothered. I let that sit in my chest for exactly 1 second. Then I looked at my husband. Did you know? His voice cracked on the last word. About the will. Did you know he was going to? No. Marcos. My voice was calm. I found out with everyone else. He pressed his fingers to his mouth, composed himself. When he spoke again, it was quieter, more controlled. But underneath it, threaded through every word, was fear. Real fear. The kind that arrives when consequences finally catch up to choices. He took me out completely. Braga's office called to confirm the changes were filed, and Fernanda. He stopped. Started again. Do you understand what that means? Everything we'd been expecting. The apartment alone. Marcos. My voice was calm, steady in a way I hadn't heard from myself in years. I understand exactly what it means. Then talk to him. The composure slipped again, just slightly. Ask him to reconsider. Tell him it was a misunderstanding, that I was going to come to the hospital. You just what? He stopped. I took 1 step toward him. Not aggressive, not angry, just present. Completely and quietly present in a way I hadn't been in years, because I finally had nothing left to protect. You just had lunch with the regional team, I said, while my father was in a hospital bed with a cardiac event, while I was sitting in a plastic chair in a waiting room, while Sir Claudio Ferreira, a 68-year-old retired neighbor, sat in a parking lot for 3 hours because that's what people do. The color left his face. Slowly. Completely. Antonio made his decision, I said. The same way you made yours. Clearly. Deliberately. Without asking anyone's permission. Fernanda, please. He has spent 79 years showing up. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For my mother. For me. For every person he has ever loved. He has never once, not once, chosen lunch over someone who needed him. I looked at Marcos for a long moment. He just finally stopped expecting everyone else to do the same. The living room was completely silent. Marcos looked at me. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in years. And I watched something move across his face. Not just fear now. Something deeper. The specific look of a person who has finally understood the full size of what they lost. Not the money. Not the will. Me. He had finally understood he had lost me. His phone buzzed in his hand. He looked down at it. My father's name on the screen. He looked up at me, eyes wide, something in them that might have been hope. I looked back at him for exactly 1 second, and I felt it. The last thread of something I had been holding for 11 years finally going slack. Not with anger, not with drama, with something quieter, with release. I picked up my keys from the hook. I'm going to check on my father, I said. I opened the front door. The evening air came in, cool, clean, carrying the smell of the city after a cold day. Oh, I said, turning back one final time. Marco stood in the middle of the living room, phone in hand. My father's name glowing on the screen. 38 calls worth of consequence written into every line of his face. I looked at him for exactly 1 second and felt nothing but clarity. You should probably answer that. I closed the door behind me, and I exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't know you'd been holding it. I stood on that landing for just a moment. The evening air hit my face. Cold and clean and honest. And something settled over me that I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not bitterness, not the sharp heat of a woman who finally had enough. Clarity. The quiet, unmistakable clarity of a woman who had finally, after years of telling herself things were fine, after years of smoothing things over and swallowing things down and sleeping on the right side of a bed, leaving room for someone who never moved toward her, finally seen her life exactly as it was. I had not been married for 11 years. I had been enduring for 11 years. There is a difference. And standing on that landing with my father's voice still in my ears and Marcos's face still in my mind, I finally understood it completely. The hospital didn't make me see it. Antonio Oliveira lying in that bed with a cardiac event while his son-in-law passed the breadbasket. That didn't plant a seed. It burned the whole field down and showed me exactly what had always been growing there. I walked to my car, started the engine. The radio came on low. Something old. Something my father used to hum on Sunday mornings while he made breakfast. I let it play. I didn't make any decisions that night beyond one. I was not going back into that apartment. Not that night. And somewhere in the place where a person knows things before they're ready to say them out loud, I knew it wasn't just that night. Some things don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with a dramatic moment or a final argument or a door slamming hard enough to shake the walls. Sometimes they arrive on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later, when you're sitting across a table from a man in a quiet office, signing your name on a document that turns one life into two separate ones. And the feeling isn't grief, exactly. It's closer to the feeling of setting down something very heavy that you carried for so long you stopped noticing the weight. That's how it ended with Marcos. Not with a war, with a signature. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The night I left, I drove to Dad's. He was awake. Of course he was. Sitting in his chair by the window with his reading lamp on and his crossword book open, like a man who had simply decided to be available in case he was needed. He looked up when I used my key. Took one look at my face. Sit down, Mina Fila. I sat. He made tea, the specific kind, the specific time, because I had told him once and he had never forgotten either. We sat across from each other at his kitchen table, the same table where he had helped me with homework and celebrated my promotions and listened to every hard thing I had ever needed to say out loud. I told him. All of it. The conversation. Marcos's face when he saw the missed calls. The fear in his voice when he said, "Do you understand what that means?" The moment his phone buzzed with Dad's name on the screen. Dad listened the way he always listened. Completely, without interrupting, without rushing toward a conclusion. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" Not, "What are you going to do?" Not, "I told you so." Not, "Finally." Just, "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said. And I meant it. "I think I actually am." He nodded slowly, looked at his tea. "You can stay here," he said simply. "As long as you need. This is your home too." I looked at him. 79 years old, cardiology follow-up in 2 weeks. New medications lined up on the counter in a little row, still, without hesitation, making room. "I know, Dad. Your room is exactly as you left it. I've lived here for 20 years. The principle stands." I laughed. The first real laugh I'd had in days. It came out rough and surprised and felt like something loosening in my chest. I stayed. The weeks that followed were not simple. I won't pretend they were. Separations are never simple, even when they are right, even when they are necessary, even when you feel, in the deepest and most honest part of yourself, that you should have arrived here sooner. There are logistics. There are lawyers. There are shared things that have to be untangled one by one, like knots in a cord you've been adding to for 11 years. There are moments, late at night, when you lie in your childhood bedroom and you think about the version of yourself that walked into a marriage full of hope and you feel something tender and sad for her. Not regret, tenderness. Because she was trying. She was always trying. She just didn't know yet that trying alone wasn't the same as building something together. Dr. Eduardo Braga handled my side of it. He was precise and calm and thorough. He treated the whole process the way he treated everything, with careful attention and without drama. Marcos didn't fight the separation. I think some part of him understood, by the end, that there was nothing left to fight for. The man who had closed a bedroom door gently and said, "Figure it out," had shown me something true about himself. And you cannot unsee true things, no matter how much easier it would be. He kept the apartment. I kept my car, my savings, and 11 years of clarity about exactly what I needed from the next chapter of my life. Dad's follow-up with Dr. Mendez went well. "Your father," the doctor told me afterward in the hallway, "has the discipline of a man 20 years younger. He's doing everything right." "He always has," I said. At home that evening, Dad was in his chair, crossword book, reading lamp, the Fusca calendar on the wall from the restoration club he'd joined 3 years ago. The same kitchen, the same table, the same man who had been the most constant thing in my life for 53 years. I sat down across from him. "Dr. Mendez says you're doing everything right." "Of course I am." He turned a page. "I have reasons." I looked at him for a long moment. This 79-year-old man who had braided my hair badly and consistently, who had parked around the corner at job interviews, who had shown up with tools and coffee and never once asked to be thanked, who had sat in a hospital bed the morning after a cardiac event and called his lawyer with complete calm because he had decided that the people who showed up deserved to inherit what he'd spent his life building, who had left the light on for me when I came home with nowhere else to go, who had simply said, "This is your home too, Dad." He looked up. "Thank you." My voice was quiet. Not just for the will, not just for any of this, for all of it, for every single thing. He held my gaze for a moment. Those dark brown eyes, still sharp, still warm. Then he set down his pen, reached across the table, and covered my hand with his. The same hands. Always the same hands. "You don't thank family for showing up," he said. "You just show up back." The kitchen was completely still. Outside on Rua das Flores, the evening was settling in, streetlights coming on one by one down the block. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's radio playing something soft and old. "I know, Dad," I said. "I know." He patted my hand twice, released it, picked up his crossword. 7 letters, he said, means to begin again. I looked at him. At the lamp. At the kitchen I had grown up in and come back to. At the life that was, somehow, still exactly where it needed to be. "Restart," I said. He counted the boxes, wrote it in, nodded once, with deep and quiet satisfaction. Perfect. The first phone call I ever made in a crisis was to my father. I was 7 years old and I had fallen off my bike and he was at my side before I finished the sentence. That was Antonio Oliveira. That was always Antonio Oliveira. And every single time, for 53 years, without condition, without calculation, without ever once making me feel like I was asking for too much, he came. Some people spend their whole lives making withdrawals from relationships they never bothered to deposit into. And some people show up. My father showed up. I learned from him. And the life I am building now, slowly, carefully, one honest day at a time, is being built by a woman who finally understands the difference.